Hey Faith Family, welcome to the Beyond Sunday podcast at Calvary Bible, where we go beyond the Sunday sermon to explore some rabbit holes and to bring some biblical truths to the surface. We hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Calvary Bible Church, welcome back to another episode of Beyond Sunday. This is the second time in a row with Austin.
Is it 2 times in a row?
Yeah, you were with me the last time we recorded it.
Yeah.
We had a sermon
Wow.
in between
That's right.
the prayer series,
That's right.
but we didn't record a podcast about that one. It was the Sunday
The barbecue
Friends
bonanza day.
barbecue. Man,
Yeah.
I got it wrong. Although that is the first time I think I've gotten it wrong all year.
It is. I've said it wrong too, but
Yeah,
It's all
it's
right.
okay. The barbecue bonanza that you bring your friends
yeah,
to.
that's right.
Invite your friends. So because this is your second time, I'm expecting you to have a joke.
Yeah, I'm glad. I do have a joke. It's
Okay.
related to pencils. I'm just joking. That was my joke. But I don't have a joke.
Okay, well, I've got a quote for you.
Let
Did
me
you
hear it.
know, this is not a joke, no joking here today. Today's National Pancake Day.
Is it?
Yeah, in September, today's the 26th,
Yep.
day of this recording.
Wow.
National Pancake Day. Yeah, everything's got a day. But here's my quote for you. Very serious. Charles Spurgeon.
Wow.
No joking. He says, there is hardship in everything except eating pancakes.
Except eating pancakes.
Yep. Spurgeon must have been a pancake lover.
Wow. Yeah, he must have been. I mean, I would have said that about waffles or eggs, but
Yeah.
I don't know about
Hey,
pancakes.
there's lots of good food. Pancakes are one of them. I eat them. I make them pretty often on Sunday
Do
mornings.
you?
Yeah.
I don't wake up early enough on Sunday mornings. That's my
No.
honest confession.
No.
I eat Lucky Charms.
Oh,
or something like that.
child.
Yeah, I know.
That's what my 7-year-old daughter eats.
Yeah, hey, that's fine.
When she
been
can.
Eating them. Yeah, I've been eating them since I was 7.
I don't
so.
give her that junk. Anyway.
She wants to grow up to be strong and healthy like me. Tell her to keep eating them.
We're going
We
to
need
just
help.
stop
This
there.
is-
We're going to stop there. All right. So week 2 of the prayer series. And we were in Luke chapter 18 this week. We've got a couple of questions, some other thoughts that go along with it. So, Austin, you got one.
I
So
do.
why don't you throw it on the table for us?
Sweet. You want to hear mine first?
I do.
All right. So I didn't send this into the podcast, but when you asked me if I had questions, this was the first one that came to mind.
Good.
And it's related to verse 8. I'll read 7 and 8 to get a little context. So Jesus says, and will not God give justice to his elect who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long over them? I tell you, he will give justice to them speedily. And my question was specifically related to that word speedily, in the sense that I can understand, it's easy for me to understand, all right, we're asking a good loving father for something over and
Mhm.
over again. He desires to give us those things, but why did Jesus say speedily? Because there's been many times where I feel like I've prayed for things and it's like, did not happen in my timeline.
Yeah, does not feel speedily.
Does not feel quick.
Yeah.
So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean that was something that I looked at. Yeah, I mean, it didn't come out Sunday, but the word actually, here's something that's interesting. The Greek word that's translated there is tacos.
No way. Wow,
Yeah.
that translates to speedily.
Yeah,
Nice.
so tacos we hope to come speedily, but God's answer to our prayers doesn't always come speedily. But
Yeah.
so there's a little nugget for you,
Wow,
a little taco for you.
I'll use that in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably not.
Nope.
But it comes with a connotation also of like suddenly, like without necessarily a forewarning or something
Okay.
like that. But then I think also just all of these things, God, speedily is subjective. Whose time are we talking about here? Because if it doesn't happen instantaneously, like minutes later, does that mean it's not speedily? And then we know that God's timeline is
Right, different than ours.
different than ours.
Right.
Yeah. 2 Peter 3:8 says, reminds us that with the Lord, one day is 1,000 years and 1,000 years is a day. So God operating outside of time, which
Right.
we live in without getting too philosophical, God's going to respond and answer us and justice will come suddenly in his time, when it's ready. So, but no, I mean, there's
Right.
definitely times where we're asking for something, and for this parable's sake, this widow, she's got to keep coming back and back and back and just repeatedly asking for justice until she's finally
Right.
given justice. But no, that's a great question because it doesn't always
Yeah.
feel that way to us.
So it's referring to some ways in the Lord's timing.
Yeah, I think that's how. Yeah,
a
that's
good read of
how.
it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in God's time,
Okay.
He will respond, and justice will come. Yeah, but not necessarily quickly in our timing of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That makes sense.
So, yeah, He won't delay longer than He wants to
Mm-hmm.
on that. Is that sufficient there?
Yeah,
Did
I
hit
do.
you?
I think I have another question.
Shoot for it.
I'll just throw it on you here.
Yeah.
So later on, in verse 8, it says, well, I'll just read all of it again. I tell you, he will give justice to them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith? And you shared with me that sometimes at the end of a parable, Jesus will give like the main point or summary at the very end. Is that the point that Jesus wants us to get from this parable?
Yes and no. I think that very ending there, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? That kind of ties it to the rest of this section in Luke, where
Okay.
he's talking about the kingdom and the
Okay.
coming of the kingdom and the end times. I think it's
Yep, you
yeah,
have that earlier.
chapter 17.
Yep.
The coming of the kingdom is a subtitle there, and
Right.
it goes into just a parable there. So
Gotcha.
or some teaching there from Jesus about the coming of the fullness of the kingdom. When's it going to happen? And just
Right.
remembering too that their understanding of the kingdom coming was different than Jesus's understanding of it, and so there was a little bit of miscommunication there, not on Jesus's fault, but them to understand what he meant. And so this is talking about him coming back, and will he find faith on earth?
Yes.
What was the question again?
So
I
does
lost
that
it in
sum
there.
up the parable? And the funny thing is, ironically, I taught on verses 20 through 37 of Luke chapter 17 at Sunday school. And so we were
Interesting.
talking about like the coming of the kingdom in fullness. And so then it's interesting when you say that. It makes sense for me that he's not just referring specifically to the parable, it's to what he had said right before that. But the chapters throw me off a little bit.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have had that.
No,
It's
and
like flow. It's a flow here. Chapters break that up a little bit, but that
right,
makes sense.
they do, and I mean there would be some debate about whether Jesus just rolled from one to the next.
Correct.
Is his audience different? My take on that would be his audience is probably the same, but the way Luke organizes things, it's he pulls things together in his gospel at times that fit the subject matter.
Yeah. So here's the point that's being communicated.
Right, and he's lumping these, the coming of the kingdom together.
Right.
So the coming of the kingdom would be that subtitle that you'll find in a lot of translations, and then it's followed up with this parable of the persistent widow, which ends with, nevertheless, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth? And I actually had a comment about finding faith, and there's in the original language, we don't see it here, but there's a definite article in front of that word faith, the faith. Okay, so will he find the faith, which just again, I think points out that the faith that he's looking for, and I said this could have worked in Randy's Hardworking Faith series, the faith that Christ, the Son of Man, is looking for when he comes back is going to flesh itself out in a couple of ways, or a number of ways, a couple of them being that the faithful ones are not losing heart, and they're always praying,
Right.
which is what this parable specifically is then about. So when you say, is that the main part of the parable? It's yes in that way, but
Yeah.
no. And then I think the parable is communicating a little bit more specifically
Right.
to those ends.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's good.
And I think too, so that kind of leads us into another question that came in, which I mentioned some commentaries that I was reading
Yeah.
and how I was taking, just kind of going against their counsel. So the question was, what was the take from those commentators?
What were some of the commentaries?
There's a Preaching the Word commentary that I borrowed from Austin.
That's
One of my favorite commentary series, honestly. I mean, these guys in that series, they do a really, really good job. And somewhere else too. I can't remember where, but I read from a few different sources.
Was it the Ryle?
No, it wasn't J.C.
Okay.
Riles. I can't remember.
That's fine.
I was
just curious
picking
to
it.
know,
I mean, I
but-
probably read from 6 different, either articles or commentaries and
Yeah,
stuff
so
like
you had
that.
a stack of books.
Yeah, but I remember, going through that and thinking, that's really interesting. I would have said that is a main point of the parable. And I think their take on it, though, was that, when they're hearing this sermon preached, it's just really like honing in on this idea that prayer should be persistent and just keep coming to God with the same thing and over and over and over, like bothering him with it, pestering him with it, and just incessantly bringing a request before God. One, they didn't feel like that was the main point of the parable, and I don't totally disagree with that. And then 2, I think they've probably heard it preached or taught in a way that is making it seem like God is going to shift his plan because of
just us begging him.
Yeah, exactly. And I did say something to that effect, like, we're not going to twist God's arm, or coerce him into something that is not part of his will. But I think he sovereignly ordains our prayers as much as he does the answer to our prayers.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point.
But one of the reasons I did, kind of hit that and lay that out as a main point in the parable is just because, and this isn't the case with all parables, excuse me, but I think there's a lot of parables, a general rule of thumb is how many main characters are there? And there's a main point for each character. So we've got 2 primary characters, the widow and the judge.
Right.
And I do think the judge, if you were going to, nail me down and say, what's the main point? I'm going to say it's like a 1A and 1B type thing. And the 1A I would point out is just that the judge character contrasted to
God's character.
character.
Correct.
Yeah. So
That's
the
good.
unjust judge is contrasted to a just God, the one who does not want to answer relative to a father who wants to answer. And a judge who is self-serving as opposed to a God who is serving.
Yep.
So I would say that's the primary takeaway, but just right behind it is this widow and us, the children, the church, falling in line with her example.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I was reading there from my commentaries.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm tracking with you. That's really helpful for me, honestly.
Yeah, I love parables.
That's fascinating.
They're a blast. I've spent a fair amount of time in different parables, and I do remember reading a couple of books about them, and one of them, I think it was Craig Blomberg. He's pretty easy to read, and that was one of his takeaways or his approaches to parables, that if you're reading a parable, how many characters are there, and then look for a truth or a faith principle that applies to each character.
Yeah,
which doesn't always
right.
work, and sometimes, I mean, some interpretations of parables get pretty wacky. But that's been a pretty stabilizing rule or some guardrails for you when you're reading the parables.
That's good.
They're fun.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was that.
Yeah, that's good. I'm out of questions, so.
Well, I got another quote for you.
Fire away.
This is not a Spurgeon. This is Augustine. Just talking about just how that verse or that parable ends with Jesus saying, "Will he find faith?" So I did read this. Augustine says, when faith fails, prayer dies. And just that's been interesting. So we've talked about this prayer dare, which is why I labeled it on Realm, this dare to match your whatever's distracting you the most. And I think for a lot of people, it's something on their cell phone. So whatever's distracting you the most, match your prayer life time-wise with that thing. And so one of the interesting things for me up to this point in the week has been just seeing it start to shift my faith. I'm praying. I've sensed a little bit already, like my faith starting to increase because I'm going to God, knowing that He's good, knowing He's my Father, and knowing that He wants to move justly, and what that does to faith. And so, anyway, I guess I'm just pointing out here that there's this connection that you can't break between faith and prayer. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was kind of a nice pointed statement. When faith fails, prayer dies. Mm-hmm. And you could reverse engineer that. Yeah. If prayer is alive and healthy, faith is going to be thriving.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's good. I'll throw something in there that I saw on social media this week, but it relates to what we're talking about. It actually got me thinking because it wasn't exactly related to what you were talking about, but in a way it was, or made me think about what you were saying on Sunday. And it was just a video of a guy, and it was like the caption was like, if Christians treated their Bible like it was their phone, and it was like somewhat joking, but it was like a guy where he like rolls out of bed. And like first thing he does is he like reaches over and he grabs his Bible and he starts flipping through it, and he's there and he's brushing his teeth, and instead of his phone he's got like his Bible in his hand, and he's like sitting there on the couch and he reaches over and it's his Bible that he grabs instead of his phone when the TV's on. He's like flipping through it. And it was one of those the video was humorous to kind of express the point, but I in my mind in a way replaced the Bible with prayer just for the sake of what we were talking about, and thinking like, man, what would it be like for me if I replaced, if I treated prayer like I did my phone, praying while I'm, I don't know, when I wake up in the morning, or, when I'm driving to work, or just some of those downtime moments that we use our phones for. So,
it's amazing. And I think, we're such a distracted culture. And it's happened so subtly. Yeah. So for myself, remembering a day when there wasn't cell phones, and then the increased capabilities of cell phones.
I'm not going to make any jokes, but
thank you. But man, we're so distracted, not just by cell phones. And again, I tried, and I'll say it again. I don't want to make the cell phones seem like they're, an evil in and of themselves. But man, there's just a lot of people that waste their lives on their phones, and it's disheartening. And if we're not careful, it can happen to us. And I think to a degree is happening to us. And so, that's a personal confession too. So just to think about, that's a great comment, though. I would like to see that of what would life be like? What would your Christian life, your faith be like if you treated the Bible like your cell phone, or your prayer life like your cell phone? Rather than before you text a friend, say a prayer to God, and just be in communication with Him. And it would change. It would change you because our phones change us. They have changed us. It's a scary fact. It's something that I remember reading about younger generations and phones and screens in particular. Is there's a 2-word sentence: screens disciple. Screens are discipling people, is the point, by what we're consuming. And so if we're just not careful, it can just happen. Yeah. And do you remember a day where smartphones didn't have, before smartphones?
I do.
Okay, so you remember that day.
Yes, I remember that.
But suddenly, it is, I remember my dad getting the first smartphone in the family, and I was like, whoa.
My dad got the first one too.
Yeah, you can check a score,
That was
or
the
you can
coolest
get on
thing.
the internet. And
Yeah.
it's like, man, this is amazing. And now for the most part, most folks have a cell phone that has, data, and you can access the internet from pretty
Yep.
much anywhere, easy anywhere access. And we do.
What in the
But
world
at the
did I
same
do
time,
waiting in the doctor's office before a cell phone?
you looked at a magazine.
I must have. I don't know what I did. Did something.
But what makes technology so tricky is that I just said easy, anywhere access. But apply that to prayer, it's the same. Because of what Christ has done for us, we have easy, anywhere access to the throne, and yet we don't avail ourselves to it.
Yeah.
So it's just a convicting thing to think about. And not telling you to smash your cell phone and get rid of it, but put it down and do other things that have more value.
Yeah.
And prayer would be one of them.
Yeah.
So
it's a good word.
Anyway, prayer dare. I'm doing it. Post on Realm. Kind of your experiences, things you're learning. That's my encouragement to y'all. It should be good for us.
Yeah. Good.
I'm going to do it. Anything else? No jokes? I'm going to close this down before.
No, I would close down. You had a good word to end with there, so I'd wrap up with that.
Okay.
I say it's going to be
there we go.
So
easy anywhere access to our Savior. Great. Well, thanks for listening and doing the podcast with us.
Yep.
We'll be back next week. We're doing prayer again.
Yep.
2 more weeks of it. And questions, email them into podcast@cbcmj.com, and we'll tackle them as best we can. So appreciate you guys. See you on Sunday.
Yep. See y'all.
Thanks again for joining us on today's episode. And remember, our Sunday sermons are meant to lead us to a life of worship beyond Sunday.